thanks, David. It kind of reminds me of, you know, the way it works at conventions for politicians. The nominator speaks, and the second one just says, "I second the nomination." I should leave it at that. Good job to both Joseph and David, and thank them, and for everybody who was involved tonight. I don't want to get into that hazard of leaving anybody out, but I know a lot of people worked to get you here, to get the other donors who aren't with us tonight, and there's no other way that this gets done. It is a decision that people have to make, and I'm glad you're making that decision, not just because it helps me and what I'm trying to do, but I hope you're starting to feel, maybe because of tonight, maybe because of who brought you here, maybe because of who contacted you, that you're part of a we that's going to make a difference in this province. There are certain times when it's more important to look at what we have in common, when we actually have to try and rise above crass partisanship, the things that differentiate us, and we have to force ourselves to find out how we can work with other people. And I am absolutely convinced that we're at that point in this province and in this country. And we have to find our own ways to move forward, but we're going to have to do some of that solving new problems that are hurtling at us. And I do not accept for an instant that somehow the next generation is going to be worse off than the one before. I will not let that happen. And certainly not for lack of energy in terms of trying to create the kinds of opportunities that every generation up to now has had. Every one of us have had parents and grandparents and I guess even further down the line that have made sacrifices to be part of this country, to be part of building it up, to be part of making sure that there's fair opportunities there, and we're faltering in that regard right now. Now, there can't be a more liberal concept, but it's not an only liberal concept to say that people should be able to apply their hard work and abilities and be able to move ahead. But if you're talking to a lot of young people today, it's not happening that easily. And it's not happening that clearly. And so, you know, I look at the task as very straightforward. I look at, in fact, the fact that we have a fiscal situation that has to be dealt with is not our primary problem, but it is the one that should galvanize us to do things better and differently. And if you're reading the headlines today, there's a little part that says I have a peace plan to fix education, and a big part that talked about problems with certain systems in government and so on. The point here is that government has to start to become part of our competitive advantage. And I don't mean just so that, you know, taxes can be lower and people can be more competitive, but in a way that people feel trust and faith in our capacity to do things together. That's what matters more. I don't think there's anything important that I've done that I bought, that I paid money for. I mean, for example, David talks about the food industry. The food industry had food that they weren't using, and we actually offered them a service. We moved that food out. We did it in a timely manner. We kept it safe. We got it in the hands of people who should be using it. And then we asked the public to participate through, you know, a variety of means. Loblaws helped sponsor a paper bag that went in the Toronto Star and so on. And the point was, though, that we didn't really, you know, $1 spent got us $35 worth of food distributed. But the real point was we set the table for people to do things better. You know, today there's a dispute going on about education. And it's not really a dispute about education. It's a missed opportunity up to now to really put on the rails what we had started to do and now needs, I think, another boost, which is, you know, the idea that one of the best things we do in government, one of the things you can really call an investment, is the money you spend to help people reach their potential. And if I had my druthers, and I think I'm trying to have my druthers, and this is where I'm trying to get, we wouldn't talk about social programs. We talk about programs that help people reach their potential. Because something happens when we cross that line to where our taxes go. And we lose sight of the individual. We lose sight of their dignity. And we lose sight of the fact that we've got a tremendous amount of potential that isn't being used. And helping people reach their maximum contribution to society is what we should be looking at everything to do. Now, education does that perhaps more clearly than other areas. And what we did in terms of some of the numbers that David was talking about, not all those results were realized right in the parameters when it was there, but that's what's happened. The dropout rate is cut in half. There are kids that did not succeed at reading, writing, and math, but more importantly, they're now able to do things and have confidence in themselves, and they're moving on and creating some success for themselves and their community. And we need to think of our recent immigrants. We need to think about our people with disabilities, so-called. We need to think about anybody who's not having the right opportunities in society in that fashion. And until we do, we're still going to be a society constrained and held back just by our own lack of imagination and creativity. And my view about the present challenge is that there are lots of ways for us to do things better. I don't think that anybody in the public service knows, it doesn't respect and appreciate the fact that the Treasury is constrained. But fortunately, you know, we have something of a consensus report in the sense that Mr. Drummond has done something that I think impresses the business community, and that the people in labor see some possibilities there. But it has to be done in a way that is really about how we move forward. It is not about dampening down the hatches and crushing people's thoughts about what can be done. It has to be quite a bit the opposite. And I think there's two things that the Liberal government has done that, you know, with any group of people, it could have sapped their energy. Like, one was recovering from Mr. Harris, because he took that route that Mr. Drummond said was not the right route to do. Cutting across the board, pushing down budgets in a way that just, then they have to spring back up. I mean, if you close hospitals in an erroneous fashion, then you've got to build new ones. And, you know, there's a whole kind of consequence to those kinds of things. If you fire 10,000, 12,000 nurses, it takes years to get back to the point where you can actually serve people adequately again. And so, you know, the opportunity that we have coming out of that, I think a lot of good services were put in place. And then second, we never had a global recession. And the challenge, I think, was met fairly and well by the current government. But the challenge ahead is the one that is more important. And that's what kind of opportunity we're going to fashion for everyone here. And it has to meet certain principles. We can't leave anybody behind. There isn't, you know, we're starting to shape up that mentality that we might justify somehow, that there's things we can't do, that there's limits to what we can accomplish here in Ontario. And when there are realistic things that we have to say, yes, we have choices about what we can do now and what we can do later, we have to watch the thinking that goes into that. We were bestowed an expanding view of citizenship, not a narrow view. It's an idea of Canada that could be improved upon by every generation of immigrants and of people who got access to their rights as individuals. And that's how we got to be a better country, not because we spent more money in government. And so the current challenge of doing things with somewhat less money, I think, can be attained, but it has to be done, as David has alluded to, with some kind of big, not conversation, because a conversation suggests we talk and we don't get something done. But we really have to have here is a summit between business and labor and the not-for-profit sector and the politicians, which frankly have not all been bringing glory on themselves in terms of the way the legislature has worked in recent times. And some of that poison and that hyper-partisanship simply has to go by the boards, because there are people looking to and depending on us on our ability to work together. Now they're in this room because I know what the ticket price was. There may not be that many people who feel that they need government. But I think if we were to talk with any one of you for more than a couple of minutes, there are services that business offers, there are sectors that you work in that are regulated and that are done by government that you want to be well functioning. And I think none of us are too many generations removed from the fact that there's a time and a place for us to be working where we acknowledge everybody being of equal worth. It doesn't mean, it just means they're entitled to the same respect, the same opportunities. And letting go of that would be something more than a shame. We have to check ourselves, I think, to say, have we got the same ambition as the people that brought us here? Have we given back enough? You know, when I ran for leadership in 2006, I talked about my generation as having failed a bit. That kind of annoyed people at my age bracket, but I haven't really let go of that idea, that there's something more to give back, but it doesn't just include people of my particular vintage. I think there's a whole bunch of people out there that have done well, and we still haven't created what our kind of legacy is. Because our legacy has to be unlocking some of the difficulties that we've run into. Not just young people not having the same opportunities that you could take for granted, you know, a generation ago, but a whole range of things in terms of how do we deliver healthcare in a sustainable way in the community that's in keeping with people's dignity. You know, a little event happened two weeks ago in Ottawa where they closed 4 hospital beds and they opened up 10 hospice beds. Now, what's the significance of that? Is that 10 hospice beds, properly run, given people and families a place where palliative care can be given, where people go for their last days with so much more dignity, so much more civilized compassion to be expressed for the same cost of 4 beds where people didn't need to be. And so I don't want you to come here and just enjoy the fellowship that's happening and feel that you contribute to this campaign. I wish I could do that, but I got to ask you to do something more. I got to ask you to be part of this. I got to ask you to consider being a delegate at this convention coming up, because I need persuaders. I need people who are not going to ask for less for this province going forward. This province leads Canada. It's a privilege to do that. We're the biggest population with the most resources, with the most advanced kind of ways to interact with the rest of the world, and we've got to put forward a plan that is going to help with the rest of the country. We understand very much what Alberta and other provinces have to bring to the table, but we have that role. And I have to say that we've not seen the initiatives coming from Ontario of late that would give us that leadership. And it has to come, in part, whatever part you feel up to, from the people in this room. Because that's the one thing I've learned, is that the opportunities to do something are what you make of them. I mean, they come forward. And there is a need right now for a much bigger civil and civic participation than we've ever had before. And with the greatest of respect to my opponents in the leadership race, and beyond that, in the other political parties, we don't quite have the attitude widely shared yet, and I'm hoping that it begins and gets spread in this campaign, that that's the ambition we have to have. This is not just about putting on the seatbelt and managing through a tough time. This is about doing the best that we possibly can. And under pressure, we should do better. And I believe to my toes, I've never been let down yet. I've never, ever been let down when I've had to depend on the public or on the goodwill of Canadians or Ontarians to make something happen. And so I don't stand here just as a political candidate. I'm standing here as somebody that I hope will create an opportunity for you. And there's a lot of different ways you can help this campaign. I don't think we're completely paid for yet. So if there's a little more flexibility on that front, you're welcome to help. But there is also meaningful ways to get involved with the policies. There's at least 4 or 5 people I've talked to tonight that have ingredients that we're going to need to put forward. Practical ideas are going to have to work. But in this campaign itself, it's all about persuading 43,000 people who've taken out a membership. People that haven't got a membership can still be delegates, can still be there on that convention floor, get themselves elected somewhere in the province, and be part of this conversation. Turn this into not a conversation, but an outcome. A pivoting point where Ontario and Ontarians start to look at each other as people that can do things, and where everybody is going to count, and we don't lower our ambition one bit. Anyway, thank you very much for being tonight. Merci beaucoup.